This is some suggestions for writing powerful advanced placement world history essays, and I'm talking about all three: the document-based question or DBQ, the continuity and change over time, and the compare and contrast essay. So, starting with general suggestions for all three types. First and most important is just make sure that you do a close reading. Underline the key words in the prompt. Just make sure you're answering the right question. That really is the biggest problem young writers have. They have some information in their head and they want to write what they know about versus what's being asked. And you need to look at every dimension of that: the when, the where, and the what. I call it the XYZ axis of the bullseye. For example, if you'll have a question that may be about China, that tells you where, but you need to know when. Sometimes it's embedded in just the name. For example, you know when the Han Dynasty was in 220 BC to 220 CE. And what? Will it be about the economy? Will it be about their attitudes toward technology? But just make sure you answer the right question. Look at the X, Y, and Z of it. And then when you are writing your thesis, be overt and refer to the when, where, and what. That'll force you to answer the right prompt. And then the creative act should come in the ideas, not in the format. The format should just be a very simple, analytic, two-key thesis, and we'll go over what we mean by that in a minute. But it's basically to say there are two key similarities and two key differences, and then get into it. And be overt. Use the words that are in the type of essay you're doing. Say similarities, say continuity, say causes, say effects. And as much as you can, just avoid the empty words, especially the word many. That's kind of a signal to the grader or the reader that this person is just filling up space here. So just get right to the point. Don't waste time. You don't need any introduction. This is not an English paper. There's a time and place for intros, but not here. Everyone recognizes you're writing a timed first draft. So just get straight into there are two key blank blank. And in your introductory paragraph, lay out a roadmap in your thesis and follow it with one paragraph per idea. Don't be afraid of short paragraphs. All you're going to want to have is your specific claim, some evidence, and then move on. And make sure you follow the same order that you put in your thesis paragraph in your body paragraph, so the reader can just follow it one by one. And by the way, save your evidence for the body paragraphs. You don't need to put it in your thesis paragraph. Just get your thesis in there and then get the details in the body paragraphs. And speaking of evidence, write one level below the spice themes. For example, talk about trade, which is more specific than economics. Just get a little bit more nitty-gritty so it's more specific. And here is the two key example. And you don't need to know anything about this. I just want you to follow the form. There are two key similarities and two key differences in the relative decline of the Ottomans and the Qing during the 19th century. So you've got certainly the where, Ottomans, that's in what is today Turkey, and Qing, which is in modern-day China during the 19th century. That is the 1800s. And the what is relative decline. So don't talk about their methods of manufacturing or who their trade partners are. Talk about their relative decline. Those two empires, that time, that subject. The declines were similar in that both empires suffered from encroachments from industrialized European powers and entrenched conservative elites. They were different in that the Ottomans suffered from internal nationalist movements and religious divides, whereas the Qing suffered from overpopulation and massive peasant revolts. So typically you can get your two similarities in one sentence. Sometimes you need to do your differences in two separate sentences, or else it'll be a pretty long sentence. But 3 or 4 sentences max for your introductory two key thesis, and then you just follow it literally. So your next body paragraph, of course, it would be about the similarities, because that's what you started with, and the first thing you would talk about would be the encroachments from industrialized European powers. Okay, so just follow it like a road map. And here's your visual icon of what a tukey looks like, a tukey bird, tukey, tukey, tukey. So that's true for all of the essays. Now the difference between the three essay types. So the document-based question, the key creative act here is grouping. You're going to have 6 to 10 short documents that'll all be attributed. There'll be a source. And they're not written for you. They're kind of hard to read sometimes because they have a different audience and they're different time periods. Sometimes the writing is a little bit strange. But you have to cut through that, be like an historian. Remember the shoe exercise where you're sorting things into piles. Group them. Put them into things where they fit together. And that's kind of the imaginative thing. You want to get them into 2 or 3 groups. You can group again requires at least 2 things, not one document as a group. And importantly, you can reuse documents in multiple groups. But that's the creative act. Another point you have to put in there is a point of view. Sometimes called a bias, but we'll just call it a point of view. And there's a secret phrase I want you to use. It's just, quote, "It is understandable that he or she ... And you want to look for the documents that have the most specific author. For example, it's understandable that the Confucian scholar would look down upon the growth of Buddhism since he would lose a job ... So you want to make sure that you're picking a good document, and just flag that you are now doing POV to the reader or grader by saying it is understandable that. That's the kind of phraseology they're looking for. And then last, there's the additional document. We'll just call it that. Sometimes it's called the missing voice, but what's not in this collection of documents that would complete the analysis? And you want to talk about it in terms of a group of people or a type of person. Usually it's going to be somebody who's not an elite, and yes, the peasants are never heard from, women are never heard from, but if you can be more specific, like maybe you've heard from a trader from the Muslim world but not a trader from the Christian world, that would be better. And then the point is that would help your analysis, that would add to the analysis. And that's the hardest part to say, is why that document addition would make it a more complete analysis. So make sure you say not just what's missing, but why it would help the analysis. DBQs, you don't need any outside knowledge. If you have a little, use it once you're done using all the documents. But usually time will be so constrained that your first goal is to make sure you're using as many of the documents as you possibly can. Continuity and change over time, really there's just one specific thing. You're going to want to use context, contextualization. Remember the helicopter going up 30,000 feet looking down. What is adjacent to the topic that you're talking about? So, back to Qing, China, what's going on. You might want to reference the fact that while it is declining, right next door Japan is becoming a superpower because it's the one non-West country that figured out the magic sauce of industrialization. That would be good context. And the continuity change over time, you just need to have, compare and contrast, you need to have a direct comparison. That's pretty straightforward. Just a couple more DBQ specific things. Make sure you study the prompt, and if in the historical background, about a third of the time they will give you that, and it's really useful knowledge. DBQ can be a lot of different kinds of questions. Usually it'll be continuity change over time, compare and contrast, or cause and effect. And if you know what kind of question it is up front, that'll help you. Unfortunately, some of them just don't fit the mold, and you're going to have to just use your best judgment about what kind of format to use up front. Scan the documents quickly, focusing on the source. Remember soapstone, speaker, occupation, audience, purpose, subject, and tone. Get a sense of what's going on, and then do your close reading, focusing on creating 3 sets of groups as you go through it. It's okay to say just Doc 1, 4, and 7 are about the role of women, for example, but you need to also refer to each document in your grouping separately. You can't just lump them all together. And again, a group is 2 or more docs. You can use them, each doc, in more than one way. And if you use quotes, keep them short. You just don't have time to have them longer than that. And again, you can add outside knowledge, but first, get through it inside. So just thinking about the groupings, really the most challenging thing here. As you read it, brainstorm them by doing your best analysis of the docs. Either by chronology, by culture, by thematics. Again, think the shoe exercise. Make an outline or chart, brainstorm groups, and then pick your 2 or 3 best groups and stick with them. On the point of view, again, it's understandable that the writer would say X since she is a member of Y. That's where Cornpeg comes in. Class, occupation, religion, nationality, political persuasion, ethnicity, and gender. Do at least a couple of them. And again, this needs to come from a specific document. You can't say that this group of documents have this point. And then lastly, additional document, lower class, female, worker, etc. Say why they would help. This should be the easiest point. Just don't forget it and do at least 2